Kris will not mind if I
Oh,
wear the
no.
most
I
comfortable
didn't even
pants
realize
that
you
I
were wearing
know.
sweatpants.
Hey, this is a real
I love
podcast.
it.
We're wearing sweatpants.
Is
Hi.
that Phases of the Moon?
It is.
Oh, I like it.
You know what's even better about these? They were free.
Ooh, that
My
does make
friend
it better.
gave them to me. I was like, oh, they have pockets. They're moony. They're free. It's just great.
I love sweatpants with pockets.
So welcome to our official podcast.
Oh, are we? Oh,
We're
we're
live.
going.
Yeah.
Hi.
So we will be editing later before we turn this into an official podcast textbook. So fine.
Sure.
And all our early viewers, I do have 4 students this month. We get an average of 10 views per video.
Perfect.
I
My
think
kind
that's
of
pretty
audience.
great. So Kris is my hero in
Oh,
Belmont County
and Patty's mine.
because she's a great sounding board. So in community organizing work, I'm a social worker who does advanced generalist things. And so I kind of loosely refer to that as community organizing. The most important thing is having other people because it's really lonely positions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think as a public historian and as an advanced generalist social worker, generally within 2 or 3 years of graduation, about 75% of social workers are managing something. They're
Yes.
managing a team, they're managing an organization, a small nonprofit, they're managing 3 with like very part-time pay or volunteer pay, and there's like incentive that, oh, you could just write grants to support yourself and then you'll have a living wage. So this has been the field for the time I've been in it. And people kind of encouraged me against planning to go out on my own because they said it is very lonely work.
Mm-hmm.
And you're left alone with endless deadlines. Like we are currently talking about a project that's summer 2026.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of sleeps. That's like 500 sleeps between now and then for me to go, was I supposed to send that email today?
Yes.
You know, I'm like, oh no, the dimensions. We need to get the dimensions into the moving company for something that's going to happen so far away.
Yes.
So with many of the people I'm interviewing who are in various roles throughout community organizing, the theme has been keep making friends, keep networking. I met you and you were like, I don't know if people think this is cool, but I've been on a hike within every trail within 1 hour of here. And I was like, God sent you to me. I've been waiting to meet you my whole life.
That is true.
Yeah. But you also have all these wonderful things going on.
It's
So
exhausting.
I feel like we should start with the Underground Railroad Museum because it's Black History Month.
Happy Black History Month.
Which I didn't realize until you were doing your presentation at Rotary. And I was like, LOL, it's not that yet. And I was like, oh, we're in February. It's already here.
And almost over.
And almost over. It's so quick.
Yes.
I worked at the courthouse. One of my earlier interviews was with Mike Queso at the community, the court psychiatric clinic. And so he spent 27 years of his career managing that and managing like substance abuse intervention assessments and not guilty by reason of insanity and all these things. But we also were on a subcommittee of like recruitment orientation and onboarding, looking at systemically how are we attracting the same people and how can we expand to be a more diverse workplace and what are strategies that contribute to that. And he had us participating in the YWCA Black History Month self-evaluation challenge every month. It was just phenomenal.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah. So I worked with people who this is like their favorite thing. I worked with people like I dressed up for work on Juneteenth for many years because that was the culture of like, oh, this is a day when we really celebrate.
Yes.
But when we moved to a national holiday, there was a lot of confusion.
Yes.
About like, what is this? What are we even talking about? And that has been your opus, really.
Yeah.
This is what your thesis has been on, is uncovering systemic oppression in the United States and uncovering the spots like here that have been beacons of hope. Because whenever we have trouble, there are helpers. Yes. And there's helpers who are visible and invisible. And I love that the Underground Railroad History Museum is here to remind us of that. That no matter how trying the times were, you know, the horrific things that happened just in the state of Mississippi, right? there were also people in Mississippi before there were cars, before there were freeways, connecting with people here
Mhm.
in a chain of helpers all the way along.
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
how did you get interested in something like this?
Um, so I've always loved museums.
Mm,
And I was doing a research paper. Basically, I was finishing up my bachelor's degree in history at Ohio University Eastern.
mm,
And basically, I discovered that the Quaker Meeting House here in Barnesville, just up the little driveway here from Olney Friends School, which is where we're at right now, um, they were directly involved with the Underground Railroad movement. In fact, the Quakers were largely involved here in Belmont County.
mhm.
Um, so at that point, I knew nothing of the Underground Railroad Museum, never met Dr. Maddox. So I went to the museum, interviewed him. 3 hours later, I've been here for 7 years. So I was instantly hooked. I knew very little I knew what the Underground Railroad was, but I literally thought it was like a single trail. Like I had no idea. And then learning about it locally, which is I researched for my master's thesis, discovering that there were 27 stations of the Underground Railroad here in Belmont County, Ohio. So that it was a journey. It was a huge journey, and one that I'm very proud
Yeah. So, not everyone I love reading research papers,
of.
and like I get and appreciate that that is not everyone's jam, and it's not everyone's jam to read historical documents, right?
Right.
Um,
It takes a special person.
I was got involuntarily voluntold that I was going to a training in
Voluntold.
Baltimore when my youngest daughter was 6, and I was so mad to have to be away from home as much as I had to be away from home, but
Mhm.
I also had not had a moment to myself in 12 years
Right.
because I had just been having babies and, 3D
Yes.
printing humans and then
Yes.
feeding them for my own body is a little bit consuming. Um, so I bought a grocery store version of Outlander because I had heard so much about
I'm
it.
reading that right now.
It-
Never read it
Do you
before.
know that she's a history professor?
No, I'm on page 50, so don't give me
I'm
too
just going
much.
to tell you that Diana Gabaldon is so clearly a history professor, and like I love historical fiction
I do too.
because I read it like a beach read. It's so engaging. It's so poetic. It's beautiful. There's truths in fiction that are truer than truth. And she highlights through that era of Quaker
Oh,
abolition, I think in book 7.
oh
So
my
book
gosh.
9 is the one that I
And I'm
think is
only on
about to
book
come out.
1.
Don't worry. I've reread them all. They're so like as soon
They're
as
huge
they're
too.
huge because she's a historian and she has notes in the back of the historical accuracy. So I feel like you're going to be, my new best
Oh,
friend, um, taking notes like I was. Like, oh, I need to learn more about this. And the way that Quakers are oppositional is so unique
mhm.
and it's so warm and it's so non-judgmental.
And really, like, for that time period, abolitionists, period, were considered radical, like crazy people. Like, when people thought of abolitionists, they saw John Brown. Like, you
Mhm,
know what I mean?
mhm.
But that is the Quakers are so unique that they're just so and even at that time, just so accepting and loving of such oppressed people during that time. Not only the Black communities, but the Native American communities as well. And obviously, with being leaders in the Underground Railroad movement, but all the conductors and abolitionists in Belmont County at that time were mainly Quaker.
Yeah. So our friend Mark explained to me when I was starting this project that I can't talk to people about DEI because there is no racism
Oh,
here. That
oh boy.
I shouldn't even ask about it because people will be that offended because this place was chock full of abolitionists and they just rooted out any racism hundreds of years ago. I mean, they were like forefronts. And I love the optimism and the kernel of truth that is within that.
I
Um,
will say, without saying, there is a reason the first free black settlement is 5 minutes from here.
what is the reason?
Oh, okay. I
mean,
didn't know if I was
wanna
allowed to
know.
say
I
it.
want to know everything.
Basically, towns like Barnesville pushed out the black community. And that
Because
was
this was a theme of the abolitionist
strictly
movement, is
discrimination.
not that black people are people,
Yeah.
and not that black people are deserving of love and support and
Right.
respect and freedom and to vote. It's that, well, we don't want them here,
Right.
right? But it's not good for us to hold slaves,
Right.
and that was Abraham Lincoln's stance, was that people of African descent who had been here like 300 years before most colonialists, right? Like
Mhm.
these people need to go back to Africa,
Right.
right? And that's how the idea of Liberia
The
started.
the American Colonization Society pushed for the relocation of black individuals, free, not free, just black communities back to Africa, to what is today known as Liberia. And 10 to 20,000 were relocated, and Lincoln allocated $60,000 to that society for that reason. So even the abolitionists who assisted with the Underground Railroad were members of that society. So you're right. Like, yay, let's end slavery, but you don't belong here. We don't want you here. So that discrimination was so ingrained into American society. It was very that's I mean, the struggle did not end. It worsened.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I agree with you.
So yeah, preserving that idea of whiteness,
Yes.
that concept of whiteness, that
Yes.
it's not true or real.
Right.
There is no objective measure of it in scientific terms.
No. No. And I think it's funny, like, most of us actually have some percentage of African in us. I'm 2% African.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. I'm proud of that.
My husband's considered Black Portuguese
Black Portuguese.
because in Portugal there were people who were too mixed and too dark, and they did not. The Portuguese people said, "You're not really Portuguese. You're Black Portuguese," and like put them in their own areas and segregation.
Wow.
It's really a driving force of colonialism to sort people into groups and
Yes.
to recreate caste systems.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that made me aware of what a colony and what colonial mindsets America has is
Mhm.
traveling through the Caribbean and seeing people in like three-piece suits, like that's their parliament and that's who oversees them. Like, where did this stuff come from? And a
Mhm.
lot of the laws and things that are correct or right and how the towns are laid out. I've always said of all the places I want to travel in the world, I don't want to go to Portugal, Spain, England, France. I know what their buildings look like. They build them here. I know
Right.
what German buildings look like. Those are in my
Like,
backyard.
it's just not going to impress you.
Right.
It's not gonna be different.
Right.
I think when and we seem to have the same mindset, but when I wanna travel, I wanna go somewhere that's completely different from what I see every day. Africa, I'd love to see Africa. I think that would be fantastic. Gosh, I could go on, but anyway.
Um, Africa, the continent.
Yes,
Many,
anywhere.
many countries,
Anywhere.
many cultures. So the Underground Railroad Museum has scored which you've been executive director of for 7. Have you been the ED for 7 years?
So, I don't exactly know what I am. I run the organization. I call myself director. I report to a board of 9 members. So basically, when Dr. Maddox, the founder of the Underground Railroad Museum, He passed July 2019. At that point, I kept coming in, kept the doors open, and that's really when my taking over happened. So, what am I? I'm a volunteer who's been voluntarily running this organization for 7 years. So, I mean, that does include everything, including sweeping. So,
Mm.
writing the grants, social media content development, oh, you name it. But networking is definitely huge. Like even just going to the chamber meetings or Rotary meetings, that's also part of my job description.
And the person who said there is no racism here when you came to Rotary and presented on the history of the civil rights movement was like, that was incredible. I want to learn more. I can't wait for part two. There's so much more to cover. Because
Yes.
this is like someone told me a few years ago about the slave Bible. Do you know about the slave Bible? So there was an edition, I'm presuming it's an edition of the King James, that was produced because slave owners didn't want African spirituality to continue to persist. They wanted to erase all vestiges of African culture,
Hmm.
and they didn't want people to have something to form community around.
Hmm.
And so they wanted to convert them to Christianity, but they didn't want them to find out about the slaves in Egypt. They didn't
Oh,
want the Exodus story.
really?
And they didn't want any reference to Moses because they didn't want them to get ideas that slavery was wrong. So talk about like knowingly suppressing. When we talk about systemic oppression, we're not talking about like every white man acts racist all the time, which is the
Right.
implication and kind of the defensive stance of like, I have black friends.
Oh, yes.
What we're
I hear it all
talking
the time.
about is that people went out of their way to publish materials and be like, we'll take all references of slavery out of the Bible. And I just was like, every time I find out something new and terrible, I'm just wounded. I'm like
Right.
clutching my
Right.
pearls. And my friend said to me, but that's the thing about the word of God is it illuminates. And there's no way you can expose people to the word of God and not have it be transformational in their hearts. And they still found out about it. They
Yeah.
still found out
Yeah.
about it, and they still already knew, and they still organized around it. Um, and I feel like that's how truth is. And the
Hmm.
truth of you sharing all the civil rights leaders' historical, like what actually happened, who was there, who stood shoulder to shoulder in solidarity, peacefully,
Hmm.
civilly, you know, knowledgeably. And when you share that with people, it illuminates because that's what the truth does. And this is such an important cultural institution, I think, in the United States to demonstrate the diaspora of people who have always been on this continent because it's
Hmm.
always been a transitional continent where people
Right.
wander and form and reform because we have such a wonderful climate in North America.
We really do. I mean, that's the most beautiful thing is just how different we all are.
Mhm.
And we need to keep it that way.
Yeah. So you just landed a lovely restoration grant from, was it the enrichment fund that's
No,
redoing the?
no. Um, and honestly, I can't even remember right now.
That's okay.
But it was like a Appalachian regional grant. It was a federal grant. It was big. Um, but that was $3.9 million. It is all going to the restoration and building of the new museum within the Black Horse Inn in Morristown.
Which was one of the 27 locations, was one of the 27 stations of the Underground Railroad.
Possibly.
Love
There's
it.
a story there.
Yeah.
I'll give it really quick if we have time.
We have so much time
Okay,
because I can
great.
cut this down into 3 different 1-hour segments.
My gosh, we could literally talk weekly and
Yeah.
just like fill it all up. But basically, the tavern owner in 1831, William Swaney of the Black Horse Inn, he was an agent of the Underground Railroad. And he also would occasionally house enslaved people at his home. And I came across a document stating that, but the Black Horse Inn is located right on National Road. Um, it's a very for those who don't know, it's a very historic road, one of the first to, go across so many states, and it was like the first big road. And so basically there was so much traffic right there, and with the inn being right there, and it was big, and there was a rumor that there was a tunnel that went to another house nearby. So, with William Swaney's direct involvement with the Underground Railroad, we can assume that it was
Mhm.
a station.
Mhm.
But until we can prove and do some ground penetrating radar and kind of trace around the
Oh,
backyard and be able to see where that tunnel was going.
yeah. I feel National Endowment for the Humanities funding
Oh
on the
yes.
horizon.
Well, not
I
right
mean,
now.
sonar, that's money.
And right
That's dollars.
And right now with the freezing of the grant opportunities, and it's been really frustrating, because I had a lot of ideas and a lot of them are just kind of being pushed aside right now.
So this is
So,
the recent executive order that DEI is non-existent, right?
um, I don't think that has anything to do with the humanities,
Or
the National
the
Endowment,
national
but
funding is frozen. Is that on
certain departments.
certain departments?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, that list seems to be getting longer every day. But, yeah, the National Endowment for the Humanities is paused right now.
Yeah. So there's national funds, there's state funds, there's
Mhm,
local funds, there's um, like project specific or special interest
mhm.
group funds, and
Yes.
layering them together
Oh,
is
yes.
part of the skill, the nuance, and the art form of managing a small nonprofit.
Yes.
And what they like to see is that we also have community involvement by way of traffic and, most importantly, dollars.
Mhm.
And for small nonprofits, it seems like you want the $5 million angel investor, and
Right.
everyone is always willing to accept that money. There ever
Mhm.
is, right? But the work is in how do we get 1,000 people to give $5?
Right.
And those fundraising efforts demonstrate to larger funders, to state and to county, um, I forecasters, basically, people who are looking at what's going to be an area of growth for our region, what's going to be something that we can plan, like what's our strength we can build around. When they see 1,000 people have given $5, they say that is a community that cares about this project. So, in order to get projects like that going, you do things like brochures, which I need a stack of to drop off at Undo's West, by the way. We
Oh,
keep
yeah.
looking and like, Chris needs to be represented out here. We could move some of these around.
Another part of my job is driving around Belmont County and sticking these brochures anywhere that I think they'll be seen.
Yeah, and social media had been that.
Yes.
I feel like social media has become more of a traditional pay to play model where your posts are suppressed and your traffic is suppressed unless you're paying. I get
Yeah.
$500 ad credit offers all the time from Google. We'll take $500 off your first major purchase. I'm like, I am
Mm-mm.
not bringing money in. How do
Mm-mm.
you afford a $1,000 ad budget just on this one platform?
Yeah.
Um,
It's really ridiculous because, like, our Facebook page, we have 2.4 thousand, um, followers, likes. I do a post, I get 2 thumbs up. Like,
yeah,
really?
I have
How
moved in
does
the
that
last
happen?
year of having it almost, well, I've been using LinkedIn a lot more, and I've been using my Facebook and my Instagram as, like, if you find me out in the world, it will verify that I'm a real person, and I have multiple sources of information with the picture, but I'm not putting my time, energy, or resources into it because it's not grabbing new eyes.
Yeah.
But the one of the other ways that we gain $5 donors is through events and
Mhm.
through events like the quarter thing that we went to,
Oh,
or
the
the
quarter auction.
yeah, the
That was
quarter auction.
great.
That was so fun. That was such a
And
fun
that
day.
was with the, women of the NAACP. So all the proceeds from that event went to WIN, and WIN, took those proceeds and is donating it to the Tri-County Women's Help Center in St. Clairsville, Ohio,
Mhm.
for feminine products and whatever else they might need for these women that they help in their transitional.
Transitional housing program.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like, "What is that?"
And I think
But
when we
they
think
do so
about
many great things over there too.
yeah. So you can ask corporations to volunteer. Like in Cleveland, Swagelock is a big employer that has, I don't know if they have mandatory volunteering, but they have like scheduled volunteering days. And Sherwin Williams is a big employer in Cleveland. And the the question is, how do we utilize these unskilled volunteers in a labor project that is meaningful, that is low skill? Like what we really need is $50,000, right? But we also it's not a one and done situation,
Mm-mm.
and it's better
It
to
never
set
is.
up $500 a month of income through many recurring donors, because those are people who receive your newsletter,
Yeah.
your quarterly blog. They see
Mhm.
what's coming. And if people sign up for your Underground Railroad Museum blog, they would see that we're going to be looking for volunteers for a really historic event in
Mhm.
summer of 2026 when
Mhm.
the Underground Railroad Museum is moving.
And it looks like that month will be August.
And that month will be August. And so, August, we can get butts and seats to come out
Yes.
there and take pictures of kids
Oh, yeah.
packing up historic. I mean, talk about making history come to life.
And don't forget, anyone who helps will have to be trained. It is certainly not
Yes.
an easy task, but with these items, they're very old. Not all, but most.
Yeah.
And some might be very rare books that are falling apart.
Yeah.
So it has, we're all gonna have to sit down like an hour before, and I'm gonna have to explain to everyone how to do this
Yeah.
very
Well, Janet was
meticulously.
telling me that if the two keys is just like sales. If you have a product you believe in and you just keep on networking, you're going to do it. And I feel like the Underground Railroad Museum as a historical thing is a product you can sell, like just as a historical place, right?
Right.
But also that's a skill, and that's a skill I am using currently in my life as an executor, going through old books. When you come, if you've ever had the experience of coming into a family member's home and every room is full of books or stamps or a dresser, that is a skill we will be teaching kids. They can keep their whole lives of how do you handle things that are
Right.
made of paper that absorb the sweat from your hands and the
Oh,
oils from your
yes.
hands that can damage it.
Absolutely. And I mean, even though we don't have the equipment, but certain glass, just to keep out the rays, UV rays or whatever from either the lights, the harsh lighting, or the lighting outside. Like there's particular glass that you need to use to protect items. So I mean, it's definitely it's yeah.
So we're on a committee together for something else, a collateral project in the region, the depot, which is a historic train station, where all the other regional stations have been closed and torn down, but someone had the foresight to see this as a historical architectural building. And so it's been used for things over the last 100 years other than a train station. And as a result, you and and Bruce had an initial meeting, and you were just floored by how many people showed up,
Hmm.
because there was so much community interest as a result of people cleaning it out. like being
Mhm.
involved in the cleanup and saying, "Oh, I have this memory of this time I was here in this building and I was talking with this person who's now passed." Or, "Do you remember when this family who lived in this area and those boys were always down here?" And those are extremely motivating. And so when we can have youth events tied to the museum, they're going to remember those memories for the rest of their life and have a cultural tie-in and attachment
Mhm.
to their region and their community and the civil rights movement.
When you have a chance, visit the Olney Friends Facebook page. I posted, I think it was right before the winter break. There were students, and this school, Olney Friends School in Barnesville, has been operating since 1837. So a group of students were heading home. They were getting on the train where the depot here in Barnesville, and it's the cutest photo. 1914. They're
Wow.
getting ready to board the train. They're waiting on the train.
Yeah.
So only students and only still here. We're still operating. I think we've got 29 students, which it sounds small, but they're international students
Yeah.
also.
This is a great transition because I wanted to talk more about Only Friends because I have heard about it for years and years. And the more I hear, the more I'm amazed I am that there's this special little gem right off the beaten path.
And it's funny because, like, all the organizations I'm involved with seem to be tied together,
Hmm.
but Olney is historic. The depot is historic. The museum, clearly historic, and it's like, um, Barnesville especially is a very historic town. And it's just and there is a push for historic preservation in this town. We like our history. We like our old buildings. We want to keep our old stuff.
I know people who aren't talking to each other over dropping historic buildings.
Yeah. Yeah. I have an issue with that too.
Mhm.
And just seeing I grew up here in Barnesville in a Victorian home. And I watched the one next to it get torn down. Um, and I bawled. I straight up bawled. Um, when you lose a historic building in Barnesville, I guarantee half the population shed a tear.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a love for history in this town.
There's big, grand architecture all over the place.
Yeah. Growing up here and kind of growing up around that, you develop a appreciation that maybe someone else who didn't kind of grow up in that environment wouldn't have,
Yeah.
you
I will
know.
say the first time I left the country, I was married at 21 and we had kids right away and, no money. I'm a social worker. It does not pay great. And so the first time I left the country, I had actually revenge booked a vacation without my husband's knowledge. I was at work and it was a job I had had less than 12 calendar months. And I said, "Oh, this is this vacation I had planned for like 6 months from now." And they were like, "Oh, no, you can't take vacation for a year." And I went, "1 year, did you say?" And I booked a Danube River cruise for exactly 1 year from then.
Oh, that's
My
funny.
husband said, "Can I pick next time? Why are we going here?" I said it was buy one, get one free, and airfare was included. I don't really know, but we're going on vacation. We've waited long enough. And we flew into Budapest. And
Oh,
of course, I have a notebook full of the notes I was taking on all of my tours. Um, but down the Danube, they had one of the towns we stopped in was a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
wow.
And walking through all those little towns, I went, "Oh, I feel like I'm in Gatlinburg. Oh, I
Mhm.
feel like I'm in Brunswick, Ohio, where I grew up." Like, I recognize these buildings, I recognize this architecture. But there is a feeling that you have when you're walking through very old towns. And part of it in Europe for me through Hungary and Austria and Germany, it was so condensed. And these are all towns that are on the river, and so everything is very walkable and all the trade. And so everyone kind of habitated on top of one another. This area has that same feeling. It's not on a river, so the
Mhm.
geography is very different. It's mountainous.
Mhm.
So it reminds me more of like mountain towns, other
Yeah.
places all through Europe. But if you're looking for a historical vacation, you will not run out of things to do in the Ohio Valley.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't think people realize how much there is here.
Mhm.
Like, Belmont County has 8 museums,
Right.
and people don't realize that because 'cause we're just so small, like, you blink and you kinda, like, feel like you miss everything, but you need to stop, get off the highway, and start driving, and then you'll come to
You
Barnesville
should know where
or
you're going before you get
Flushing.
off the highway.
It'll lead you somewhere.
It will lead you somewhere. So
I
the theme of the town or the town mission statement is where history meets progress, and
yes,
there's also a lot of progress. And Only Friends is an um, it's a Quaker boarding school that is
mhm,
functional, and
yes.
it's been running. I'm going to guess it was founded in
Yes, it was
1837.
founded, and then at some point, there was a fire. So, basically, this main building that we're sitting in now, everything inside burned up, but the shell remained. So, they just built up inside the shell, and we still have this building. It's amazing. But we
I
have
do not go to many high schools where I'm driving in, and there are 5 unsupervised teenagers in trees pruning, and that's what I saw today. So can you talk about how Only is a little different?
Only is more like a family, versus a boarding school. So, with our nice small class sizes, the students get to develop this relationship with the faculty, and with the students, a majority of them being international, um, we become these parental type figures, and and you I mean, you see these kids every day and weekends. I mean, as a faculty member, we have to work 1 weekend a month, but really I think my favorite activity so far, and I had just started here, I've only been here less than a year, but, right before school started, the students hiked from here to Raven Rocks.
Oh.
I think it's 14 miles.
Mhm.
I couldn't make the hike because I had to work at the museum, but I met them for camping. So, haven't even really met the students yet, and we're all camping together. Well, obviously the boys and girls were separated, but it was amazing. And then the next morning, I'll never forget this. Everyone went on a silent hike. I think it was a Sunday. So, in a very quiet, Quaker like reflection, everyone went on this very silent hike for like an hour. It was the most peaceful thing ever. I
I'm a
loved it.
chatterer, and I
Oh,
went
I know.
on
Same.
yeah, I went on a silent hike at, the Wilderness Collective on Solstice this past winter. It was an evening solstice hike through the woods, and within 2 minutes, I had no desire to chatter whatsoever. It was amazing the calm that settles
It's
over you.
crazy. I love it. So that was unforgettable for sure. And all the stuff they do here, besides academics, like the sled riding, bowling. I mean, you name it. Rollerblading.
Yeah,
They
so
take the kids and they do stuff with them. So you become more of a family, but also academics, they offer so many amazing classes here. So yeah, it's really a unique experience.
yeah, I don't think I had a concept of a boarding school being from where I am in America. My concept of boarding school is bad kids and wealthy kids. And I don't think there's
Mhm.
either here.
It makes sense. It makes sense. And growing up in Barnesville, Belmont County is predominantly white, 92% white. Um, Here at Olney, it's predominantly black. Um, so in a white town, white county. And I believe this school is the most diverse place in Belmont County. I thought long and hard about that, but I mean, it's just it really is. So that's something very unique and rich to have
And
in Belmont
so
County.
are you considered faculty?
Yes, I am. I have a faculty position. I'm actually the philanthropy and donor stewardship manager. Or you can just call me the grant writer.
Mm.
So basically, I just write grants for Olney, but also I have those additional faculty
You
responsibilities.
said advancement and donor. What was the title?
Philanthropy and
Philanthropy.
donor stewardship manager. Like, it's
There are
funny.
so many 10-cent words
Oh, I
for
know.
grant writing.
See, and when you first asked me what my title was, I was about to just say, call me the philanthropist. Like,
Yeah.
because I have so many different roles, but they all kind of tie together. But I feel like I'm a modern day philanthropist, just across the board.
Yeah, and that is an essential component of the social contract with capitalism. And I call Donald Trump the Teddy Roosevelt of our generation, right? Because the reason we have Carnegie Hall and the Rockefeller Center is because William Howard Taft made them do it,
Hmm.
and Teddy Roosevelt, who is an emotional 5-year-old, according to Dan Carlin, um, was like, we're going to bust up these trusts, and these people can't do all of this and have all of this wealth and not do anything. And he really was bold and brazen and paved the way for Taft, who came after him and busted up 81 monopolies and said, you can't operate in this way, and created the rule of foundation giving for banks and many other organizations. The contract is when you benefit from the labor of others, you invest in your community, and there's a reciprocal relationship. And philanthropy, like, you have to be in it, you have to be networking, you have to be understanding the way that your wealth impacts your community health and the way that that impacts your personal health and your financial health. These things do not operate separate from one another.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the hard part too. And getting people on board, getting people to volunteer. There's so many nonprofit organizations out there, and guess what? They all need help, especially in these Appalachian areas. I mean, I could sit here and write 5 pages front and back of all the nonprofits I can think of, period. And they all
Mhm.
need help.
Mhm.
They all need money. They need hands. They need volunteers. They
They need
need,
people to be aware because I am a therapist out there in the world. I treat kids 0 to 99. I do family therapy. I do couples care therapy. And everyone is crying out for something. They
yes.
want meaning, they want purpose, and that is a part of our emotional health and mental health as human beings, is the need for social connection.
Mhm.
That is why our eyes have whites around the outside of them, because our ability to check in on how people around us are feeling is so essential. So
Mhm.
we have to know, unlike dogs or cattle or wolves, if you look at their eyes, it's all color, it's all iris, because they're looking for larger body movements in more of a defensive way. The reason Homo sapiens have succeeded as a race or as a species is because we depend on the well being of others. And we know that together we are stronger. So
Mhm.
that drive, we're not going to quiet it. So it's a question of giving people opportunities for the things that they really want to be involved in.
Absolutely.
So in my undergraduate coursework at the College of Mount St. Joseph, we did, research projects, and we actually wrote grants. I had things funded before I was 20 years old. I didn't know you could really do that. That you could just write a letter and get money for things. Um, but the research project I chose was to study a church and to survey people, how much, what their age range was, what their income was, how many hours a month they spend volunteering with the church, how many hours a month they spend volunteering with other projects, what their average donation is. And it's all anonymous. And I compiled the data, and I found what everyone knows If you want people to give you $5, have them come and volunteer. Because once they come and volunteer, they see what the money is for,
Mhm.
and they see the value of their, like the widow's least coin. My little bit, I can count on other people to give, and it's going to keep this resource available elsewhere. So when churches want to increase how much is in the collection plate, they have volunteer drives other places. And that's also the colonial model of most faith organizations I know. Don't they take kids on mission trips and have them come back on Youth Sunday and talk about what they did? And
Oh,
those are
yeah.
very motivational for people to become young adults who volunteer and young adults who are involved in philanthropic efforts.
Absolutely. As the Cub Scout master in Burnsville,
I was hoping, I was like, I hope Kris tells me everything she's involved in because,
I think as we get going, they're just going to keep sliding in
yeah,
there. And I only have like 2 or 3 months left of that position, but um, I love volunteer work. I love getting the scouts involved in volunteer work. I think it's awesome at a young age to see things firsthand. Um, Spending a day, an evening, a couple hours just serving food to the homeless at the community center for Catholic Charities in downtown Wheeling, that will change a child. Um, so things like that, it's crucial, especially at a young age, to get them involved. Let them see, how can we help the communities? Start with the most crucial needs.
I went to private grade school and private high school, and my parents were like, we were at the working class public or private grade school and high school. And I remember for my confirmation, they had volunteer hours. And I was like, no sweat. This is like kind of the family that I grew up in as we go out and do things anyway. And I volunteered at our local food pantry. I had always gone and done good. I went to Vinton County and did good. I went out here, I went out there. I volunteered at my grade school's food pantry and I saw my friend's parents, and it really amazed me. It made me just really appreciate the sacrifices that parents make that are so invisible to children. I noticed that my friends were not there. I wondered if if the kids knew. It made me aware of parents skipping meals to put food on the table, even in affluent suburbs.
Mhm.
Like the problem of some problems are just so universal and you can't escape them and you can't buy your way out of them. Um, and you can't move your way out of them either.
And that is a very good point, and I will share, I have used a, food pantry before.
Mhm.
I there was one time, and it was during the winter, um, I we had no food. We had no money, and I had to go to a soup kitchen, and they filled the back of my vehicle with
Mhm.
food. I will never forget
Yeah. My husband and I moved to Cleveland with like $50 in cash
that.
and a trunk full of food pantry food and no jobs and no childcare, and we were going to make it work. And I don't know how we would have made it work
I have
if it
no
had not
idea
been
how
for
this
them.
turned out. I really don't. Like, look at us now. We're like thriving adults.
Right.
But I feel like it's really, really important for people to realize, especially in those early stages, you are going to struggle, and that is okay. There is help. Ask for help.
Yeah. My sister-in-law, I remember she had bought a Jeep Cherokee. She was renting a Jeep Cherokee, and we were so young, and we were like, the only thing we ever did for fun was play spades a nickel around at her house. And we were like eating ramen after
Oh,
the
yeah.
kids went to bed. I said, that car is a status symbol. Why did you get that car? She said, well, I wanted something nice. I said, honey, we have no status. We're nobodies. We're supposed to have nothing at this point in our life. That's
Mhm.
when you have a paid off house when you get a car like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Um, and that is part of having status to me. what I really respect in people, and this is like the Blackfoot way, I don't respect how many things you own. I respect how generous you are
How you treat
and
others.
how you give of yourself, how you give, like, the most precious resource we have is time. And people can give me money and be in a rush about it. But
Mhm.
when people give me their very valuable, precious moments that they could be using editing a blog, that's really valuable to me. That's a generosity of spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I feel the exact same way. Um, so yeah, start volunteering today.
Volunteer more. Well, in social work, we have ethics, and it really drives me up the wall. Our first ethical standard is that you should consider how much pro bono work you do. I'm
Oh my
like,
gosh, yeah.
I do so many free things, and I have to stop and be like, no, they're not telling me to do more. What they're saying is it really is essential for your development as a professional to be involved and giving of yourself. And if you don't have enough of yourself left to give without exchanging it for money, that's an indication of how balanced your life is. You
Yeah.
should not be volunteering when you are in graduate school, right? Because most of the people I know in graduate school are working full time, in school full time, um, interning 17 hours a week. That's volunteering.
That's
That's
volunteering.
free 17 hours a
Mhm.
week work.
Yeah.
Oh, having a family.
Oh,
There's like funerals, births, deaths, and weddings happen when people
oh
are in
yeah.
graduate school.
And I think it's really important too to note like non-traditional students. Like like for me, I went to the University of Cincinnati. I was starting my junior year when I discovered I was pregnant with my son
Mhm.
on a running scholarship. Like everything was going great for me, and then boom, oops. Um, but and then it took 9 years for me to finally be able to go back and get that last year in and to graduate with my bachelor's degree. And then it took another year and a half to go for my master's. And at that point, um, or I think something like that. But at that point, I had two children. So I'd like to see those percentages. Non traditional students, students working on a master's degree, like never, ever, ever be ashamed of your life circumstances as you're trying to better yourself.
Yeah. And I have like 10 different courses I've taught in the Cleveland State Master's Program. This one is my favorite because students who are in advanced generalist practice who have that track are often already doing all the things that you and I are doing.
Oh, I bet.
And when they write their projects, I'm like, tell me more. Oh my goodness, that's so exciting. Hold on, slow down. You've got too much going on. Just focus on this part for the paper. And it gives me a really firsthand knowledge of the tapestry of phenomenal work going on in our region.
Absolutely. Do you hear static in your microphone?
Yeah, just stop though.
Okay. So
We're
I
still
did
running.
something right. Okay. I
Um,
touched something and it
so
worked.
you have a whole other nonprofit,
The History Detectives
the
of Belmont
History
County.
Detectives of Belmont County, right
I
here in our
love that
backyard.
organization. Right in our backyard. So basically, while I was working on my master's degree, one thing I noticed is, you know, we don't have a good nonprofit historical society for Belmont County. We do have one, but they are focused more on the town of Barnesville and
Right.
Barnesville history. So I wanted to create something that was more across the board, Belmont County. And not just like one area or another, but the entire thing. So the History Detectives of Belmont County was founded 3 years ago this month, so that's special. But and we are small, so I'm hoping more people
She says
join.
apologetically as someone who started a nonprofit on her own while doing other things. We're small.
But we're fun,
Yeah.
very laid back, and I want to spark a love in history with younger generations.
Mhm.
And it's not going to be with me having an elderly gentleman come in and talk about history that's going to put this children to sleep. It's
Right.
going to be, hey, I think there's a buried train outside of Flushing. Let's go see if we can find it and dig it up. Or I heard that there's an abandoned Indian village along Captina Creek. Let's get our kayaks and the director of Captina Conservancy head out down the creek and see if we can locate this Indian village, which we didn't, and it was horrible. But
Why?
it was
Why? That
so
sounds
much
like a
fun.
great day.
Basically, and I know what I did wrong. So as we had these meetings, we were looking at aerial maps, right? And so I think I found it. This is where we're going to go to. This is where we're going to get out. I got the landowner's permission to walk his
Oh, girl.
property. Like it was a thing. So it was July. It was about 90 degrees. And there wasn't a lot of water in the creek. So we were dragging our kayaks. And by the time we got to that location, I realized it's all uphill.
Oh.
So it was my son, my husband, and me, and Ellie Ewing. And so we start hiking up this hill. And it was the steepest hill I'd ever hiked up. And it was so tall. We finally got to the top. Now, this was rewarding. It was a ridge. And I realized, like, the way Captina Creek went around, and it was purely just this ridge. The
Oh.
Native Americans would have run the ridge. So as we were walking this ridge, just knowing that we're following the footsteps of Native Americans who took this path 200 years plus
Yeah.
was extremely rewarding.
I I feel like you probably already know this, but I don't think I heard this from you, that all of the national roads were built along footpaths that the American Indians used while they were
Well, I certainly did not say that, but I think that's really cool and that sounds right.
Yeah, Mark and
Um,
Nancy and I go to dinner in St. Clairsville, and they're like amateur historians. It's their passion. I didn't know everyone else in this region was like this too. I thought it was just the two of them. But we drive the national road, and I just feel like I'm on a guided tour every time I look out the window and I think about the people who lived here and walked through here and what the forest must have looked like. There's some
yeah.
beautiful vistas.
Yes, and that's like I do the same thing. Like I'll try to picture everything in my head, like, okay, here's where the railroad went and that sort of thing. So it's really neat. History is fascinating. It's
Mhm.
absolutely fascinating and it can be fun. It can be fun. It is fun.
Yeah.
So it takes voyages like that to say, hey, look what we can do, or at least try to do. But look what we found by not doing it right.
Exactly.
So it's always a fun story to tell.
So the Grave Creek, I'm trying to think
Mound.
of the words, Grave Creek Mound Archaeological
Yes.
Society came out and they were talking about how they turned it from a museum that was parked on native land and changed it into an archaeological um, compound with cooperation from existing local tribes, which is so cool and exactly what I want to do around everything in Belmont County. The fact that we have that local connection so geographically close and there's already partnerships in place, I feel like that's something to leverage.
Mhm. Yeah, and the Native Americans are not talked about. I mean, they're really not. Like I would love for someone, not myself, but someone needs to do a talk about Native Americans in the Ohio Valley. Like their stories, their histories, what happened here.
Well, I think they'd be amazing partners for the Historical Society of
Oh,
Belmont County.
absolutely. Like,
because the
I can
area
set you up.
has history for many, many years to come,
Yeah.
or many years before.
Yeah.
So if there was a return to where you came from, when Lincoln was sending, and that abolitionist society was talking about sending people back to Africa and establishing Liberia as a country and drawing fake lines on it, like that was 300 years after enslaved Africans were brought here. This country is only 200 years old. Using the same logic, American Indians could be like, go back to Europe
Yeah,
and like
seriously.
transplant and drop me in Ireland.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, I'd probably be with you.
Yeah.
I'm 25%, I think, no, it's up there. It's like 20 some percent Irish. But 2% African, but 20% Irish. Like, that's fun.
That's a significant amount with genealogy studies.
Another fun fact. I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm very public about it. I'm adopted. So me and my brother and my sister were biological siblings, and we were adopted by my parents, and we moved here to Barnesville when I was 6. Um, so one thing I never knew about myself is, what am I? Like, everyone seems to brag about their genealogy, their percentages, and it was embarrassing to not know. Not knowing your medical history, having no clue.
Yeah.
And like, every time I go to a doctor, well, tell me about your family medical history. I don't have it. So I guess we're gonna be surprised. But so basically, my biological father's parents came from Ireland. So
Who
that's kind
knew?
of cool. I had no idea until Kim Shutway, who owns the furniture rescue business next to the museum, she showed up with my genealogy. She did my genealogy.
Wow.
I was like, Lord.
So the local library here has a genealogy study, and
Yes,
it's kind of a unique feature for a
that is
library to
very
have.
cool. I have used so many of their resources. So Barnesville Library, or the Barnesville Hutton Memorial Library, has a fantastic genealogy room. There's a whole I love going in there, like, if I get bored or something or have nothing to do, but that doesn't happen very often
Right.
anymore.
All my free
But
time.
yeah, all my free time. I would go in there and just like start pulling out books. There's a whole series of a scrapbook. I think it's called like Wilson Scrapbook or something, where this guy in Barnesville, way, way, way back, would clip out newspaper articles and like scrapbook them. But someone copied and bound those scrapbooks. So now the library has this full, like,
Talk about a
and I mean, it
labor
was
of
like the
love.
1800s.
Yeah.
It was late or early. So a lot, my research paper on the history of the churches in Barnesville, that actually came a lot from the genealogy room at the library.
One of the articles that my students read, I believe it's the Maton 2008 article that I end up referencing almost every single week. It's called Empowering Community Settings. And empowering is like a descriptive word and a verb. It's an adjective and a verb, asking what kind of communities are empowering to the residents who live there. And one of the things about an empowering community is you can tell that you have one when people feel like they belong and people feel a sense of ownership and responsibility to their community. Like, that's at the core of citizenship, is being an active and knowledgeable member of your community. And
Mhm.
so the Ohio Valley region is clearly an empowering setting.
Yes.
And like, what are some of the other hallmarks? It's having organizations that are dedicated just to caretaking of what we hold most dear. And
Mhm.
it's very clear this is a region where people said this is a special place, and we're
Mhm.
not gonna toss those. We're not going to recycle them. We're not going to throw them on the burn pile. We are going to preserve them and make sure
Yes.
they're in a place where they're always going to be taken care of.
Yes.
And that's what we're going to be doing this summer at the Underground Railroad Museum.
Ah,
And it
yes.
will be a great opportunity for organizations to give their dollars.
Mhm.
And it's going to be an opportunity. I'm hoping to host or to participate in the Rotary Youth Leadership Assembly in summer of 2026. And I'm
Ooh.
hoping to have some of our local area seniors. I think probably they'll be sophomores now to be rising seniors then. Kind of think about how we can engage communities and what are ways that current teens
Mhm.
are emboldened and enlivened by history. Because
Yeah.
you and I were young girls tromping around in the world somewhere, and someone said, "Look, at here's a fossil. Wow, do you see that old thing? That used to be a bridge," and that like just lit something up within us. So,
Yes.
how do we learn from their perspective what might light them up and how to create those kind of opportunities?
Absolutely. Um, that's that's the fun part. So getting children in, I mean, basically everything you just said, getting younger generations involved, that's the first step. Like, I don't even, okay, for example, this is going to sound ridiculous. Here at Olney, we have Olney hours where um, the different faculty members offer, these volunteer hours to the students. The students have to have so many of the volunteer hours. So I decided, wow, the Underground Railroad Museum, 3 stories, never gets cleaned.
Mm.
Um, because I volunteer, no one pays me to clean. It doesn't get cleaned. I don't have the time. I will try on occasion, but anyway. So I offered only hours to clean the museum. It was full within an hour. 7 students signed up. I took a van, took the kids out, and we spent 2 hours cleaning. The museum was clean. It was
Wow.
amazing. But at the same time, they were seeing, they were picking up on the museum artifacts. They had
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
What's this? What's this? Why this? Why that? And then all of a sudden, this volunteer opportunity became a museum tour.
So I went to a high school that was in, it had been in a primarily Polish area. So in Cleveland, with canals and railroads, there was this influx of European white settlers. And you would land downtown and you would start talking, and based on what language you spoke, they would point towards a cathedral, and that's where you would live. So it was very segregated ethnic
Hmm.
neighborhoods. And the school I went to was in the Polish neighborhood. And John Paul II was Polish. Okay. So when he came, all the leadership from our school went to go see him when he came to the United States. So in my high school, there's a picture of my principal meeting John Paul II, when he's
Wow.
walking by. And when I was in high school, John Paul II came back, and he was in Central Park. And my cousin's youth group, on like an hour and a half away from me on the other side of the town, was going. So I went and I got to see John Paul II, and I have those pictures that I'm sure I will be showing my granddaughter.
Oh, yeah. Guarantee it.
The only kids on that train station. That is a historic picture.
Oh, yeah. You got to find that. I'll send it
So
to you.
we're creating an opportunity for your high school to create a historical picture that can hang on your hallways forever and ever of your high school kids learning and helping and assisting in this historic move into a historic building. I just think it's going to be amazing. I'm so excited about the ripples that this will create in the time space continuum.
I think so too. Like, I kind of feel like, I mean, just all these nonprofit organizations, they do knit a community. Instilling these values, and people really dedicating their time, and then friendships are made so quickly.
We're
Um,
gonna be in the Walton home together one day.
oh my gosh, I
can't wait.
can't wait.
When we have free time, can you imagine? And I talked to Mayor Jake,
I
and they're
might as
putting
well
in
reserve my spot now.
right. They're putting in the safe routes to school, and I was like, Jake, all I wanted was to be able to ride my bicycle from the Walton home to the library every day when I retire, and it's gonna be
Oh my
great.
gosh, that'd be amazing. That's all I need. Just give me a library. I love libraries.
You should come. You should retire with us. It's gonna be epic.
Yeah. We'll start reserving our spots now. We'll have like our own little like wing in the
Yeah.
Walton
The
home.
Walton Retirement Home is the only, in 25 years of social work, I have never worked somewhere where people were like falling all over themselves to tell me how much they loved living in this residential facility. And they all said for the first few months I was there, the same thing. If you can't be home, it's the next best thing.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful. And the staff all want to live there. And we
Yeah.
have former staff who come to live there.
I've already decided I would certainly prefer assisted living over, asking my children to care for me. Yes, they better visit me.
I don't want to
But
feed the wood stove
yeah.
once my knees go.
Oh my gosh.
Because you got to
Same.
feed it in the middle of the night so the creosote doesn't build up, you
Right.
know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm still recovering from the dark circles from the lack of sleep this winter. It's been bad. But my house was so warm.
Yeah.
It was so warm and toasty. But I'm done with the wood stove.
All right. On
So
that note, where history meets progress, Barnesville, the Only Friends, the Underground Railroad Museum, the not backyard. It's always the first one. The History Detectives of Belmont
I'm
County.
renaming my organization the
Yeah.
Backyard Detectives of Belmont.
Backyardigans.
The Backyardigans of Belmont County.
So we have a few links in the description. Please subscribe. Planting Trees for Future Shade. Patti Napolitano. I think it's Patti Napolitano Social Worker is my YouTube channel. Easy, common spelling. And you're going to be in our textbook. We're going to immortalize this.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah. Thank you guys, and we'll see you.
Thanks for having
soon.
me.